and the air was black with smoke from all of this heavy industry. So I'm English, completely local. My first encounter with the Orthodox Church would have been at the age of about 4 or 5 years. I have to say that from my earliest childhood, about the same age, all I ever felt called to do was to be a priest. I was fortunate in that I had many opportunities to talk with Metropolitan Anthony. He gave me a lot of his time, and he prepared me and in many ways shaped me for the kind of priestly ministry which I was to go on to perform. Metropolitan Anthony was a complex figure. He had been shaped out of a great deal of trauma and pain and burden that was the result of the emigration that followed the Russian Revolution. And he carried a heavy cross as a result of that. The Divine Liturgy was always for him a place of complete focus and encounter with Christ. He was very strict with anybody who disturbed this silence, not only in the altar, but in the church in general. And it was almost as if one saw him, oversaw him, or overlooked him, rather, having a personal conversation with his Lord. And that's an impression that will never leave me.
Is it possible to define the essence of his heritage?
Division which occurred in the Suroj diocese in 2006, I think largely was the result of differences of opinion as to precisely what the heritage of Metropolitan Anthony is or was. An inheritance is something which is lived. And I think we must realize that the future of Orthodoxy, certainly in Britain, is going to involve influences that come from all of these different roots and will make up a rather rich picture, a pattern which is drawn from various sources and has not a Russian or a Greek or an Arab or a Romanian culture, but an Orthodox culture. Within Orthodoxy, I found a relationship with Christ which I had not experienced in the Catholic Church of my upbringing. But it is our faith which comes first, and our nationality and our language and our culture, which are important, very important, but these are the things that come second. There can be a tendency to compartmentalize life into a church life and an everyday life. And when these two lives are lived separately, that can lead to problems. The history of the church, unfortunately, is heavily influenced by ethnicity. Of course, it's not the way that it should be. It's perhaps an unpopular thing to say, but in one sense, the conversion of Constantine to Christianity was not a victory for the church, but a tragedy, because it opened the way for the church to become the religio licita, the recognized religion of the empire. And that in itself caused the loss of the notion of the church as the company of martyrs. The idea of a national church is simply not an orthodox concept. This is a concept which comes as a result of the Enlightenment in Europe. It's a Protestant notion, really, to have one nation and one church. I think that one of the greatest challenges that faces the church in Russia is the challenge of what I would call spiritual consumerism. It's one thing to break communion as a symbolic gesture in a place where one would normally never have any contact with Orthodox of other jurisdictions. It's quite a different situation when one is living daily with other Orthodox as one Orthodox community. As I said earlier, here in England we Orthodox are very few and we need one another.